They always said the house was haunted, but not the kind of haunting with rattling chains or slamming doors. No, this one was quieter, more patient. It waited, it watched, and it all centered around a single, empty chair. It stood in the corner of the old Whitmore residence. Oakwood arms, red velvet seat worn thin by time. The sort of antique that would catch a collector's eye if not for the way people avoided it. No one sat in it, not even the owners, especially not the owners. The chair had belonged to Elijah Whitmore, the original patriarch of the house, a man known for his quiet discipline and piercing gaze. He built the home in 1891, a towering Victorian estate meant to rival the grandeur of the East Coast elite. Elijah was wealthy, sure, but not beloved. His children feared him, and his wife rarely smiled. The chair was his throne, placed in the drawing room where he'd sit in silence for hours, watching, always watching. After Elijah's sudden death mid-sentence during a Sunday family meeting, or so the legend goes, the family covered the chair with a white cloth and declared it off-limits. No one moved it, no one cleaned it. It was as though the chair still belonged to him. Years passed. The house changed hands. Strange, considering how so many of them refused to live there. A cousin inherited it in the 30s and died 2 weeks later. A nephew tried turning it into a bed and breakfast in the 70s, lasted 3 months. Guests complained of cold spots, a man not moving, just watching. And always, when they turned their heads for a second and looked back, the chair was empty again. By the time Margaret Whitmore took over the house in 1991, the stories were more legend than memory. She was a historian, rational, skeptical of ghost tales, and fascinated by her ancestry. She moved in alone at 38, determined to write a book on the Whitmore family history. She unpacked her boxers, set up her writing desk across the room from the chair, and stared at it for a full 5 minutes. Then she sat in it. Neighbors say they saw her rush out an hour later, face pale, hair disheveled, muttering something about voices behind the walls. She didn't come back for a week. When she did, she locked the room and never opened it again. Not once in the 17 years she lived there. That was until her niece Julia came to stay during the winter of 2008. Julia was 22, full of ambition, and freshly released from a broken engagement that had shattered her sense of direction. Margaret invited her for a change of scenery. "Come right in peace," she'd said. "The place is quiet." It was too quiet. The first night, Julia walked the halls, admiring the age of everything, the creaky floorboards. The wallpaper faded like a dream. Then she reached the drawing room. The door was slightly ajar. Curious, she pushed it open and froze. There it was, the chair. It wasn't covered. The cloth lay folded neatly on the nearby table, untouched by dust, as if someone had just taken it off. The red velvet seemed unnaturally vivid, and for a second, Julia thought she saw a dent on the cushion, as though someone had just stood up. Margaret found her staring at it. "Don't go in there," she said, her voice sharper than Julia had ever heard. "Why not?" Margaret paused as if weighing something, then simply replied, "It remembers." That night, Julia couldn't sleep. She kept seeing the chair in her mind. She wasn't afraid, at least. That's what she told herself. She was intrigued. The family stories were vague, whispers of odd happenings. No one gave details. She wanted to know more. So, the next morning, while Margaret was out at the market, Julia opened the door again. This time, she sat down. At first, nothing, just silence. Dust motes floating in a shaft of sunlight. Then, a pressure. Not physical, but emotional. Like stepping into someone else's memory, she felt heavy, regretful, angry, A deep, unsettled sorrow bubbled inside her chest. And worst of all, it wasn't hers. Voices began to whisper, just beyond the edge of hearing. Failure, betrayal, not enough. She stood up, dizzy. But before she left, she noticed something. A thin slit had opened in the wallpaper behind the chair, a hidden seam. She returned that night with a flashlight and peeled the edge of the paper back. Behind it was a compartment. Inside, she found dozens of folded letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon, each one addressed to my son Charles. Charles Whitmore had disappeared in 1912. The official story was that he'd run away. Rumors claimed he had fallen in love with a local boy and fled rather than face his father's wrath. Elijah had denied he even had a son by that name. The letters told a different story. They were apologies, desperate confessions of a father haunted by his own cruelty. In the last letter, Elijah wrote, "I sit in the chair and wait for you, every day, until you return or until death takes me. I will not forgive myself, but I will not stop hoping you might." Julia brought the letters to Margaret, and for the first time in decades, together, they made the decision to donate the letters to a historical archive and tell the truth about Charles. That spring, something changed in the house. The drawing room felt lighter, warmer. The whispers faded. The chair still stood in the corner, but it no longer felt like it was watching. It felt quiet. One night, just before Julia left to return to the city, she sat in the chair again. This time, there were no voices, no heaviness, just stillness. She whispered, "He knows now. He forgives you." And maybe it was a trick of the light or a tired mind, but she thought she felt the chair exhale. From that day on, no one feared the chair. It was no longer empty. It had finally let go.